The Niners asserted their dominance over the Eagles. We saw the Packers continue to rise, and we saw so many of our fantasy players get hurt. Nick and I are here to break it all down on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. The podcast is brought to you by the good folks from Circa and Splash Sports. We thank you for your sponsorship. Thank you guys for tuning in, especially those of you joining us in the live stream right now. Nick, how was your week 13?
It was good. It was a good week. Could have used a Kansas City Chiefs win and cover for some of my personal interests, we'll say. But other than that, I had a pretty good week. Really fun game. Really fun week of games, I should say, despite having 6 teams on bye. Looking forward to zipping through these. I'm sure we're going to have a ton to say about Chargers Patriots specifically. Yes. The rare cover by the Chargers in which they only scored 6 points. But both of our favorite teams are playing tonight on Monday Night Football. So if anything, I think that will save us a ton of time because as longtime listeners of this pod know, we usually dedicate a good 25 to 30 minutes just groveling on and on about the Jags and Bengals.
Exactly. It's our weekly therapy. Instead of going chronologically, let's go straight to San Francisco Philly as the game of the week. The statement game by the Niners, in which they struggled badly offensively in the first quarter. The Eagles jumped them. The Niners couldn't get anything done, but they held the Eagles to 2 field goals, and I think that was pretty huge. Yes. And then they caught fire after that, and it was a romp. It was one of many games that I got wrong this week. Staff picks, I'm getting destroyed, just destroyed. This might be. It's right. I think there was one year, there was a week where I went 2-13. I think this is not that bad, but it's pretty darn close. But I thought, hey, how are I was part of the squares, how are the Eagles getting points, sort of thing. And then the Niners demonstrated, this is how. And it just wasn't even close.
Well, it was close early on. And, to be fair, you can afford a bit of a slip up in staff picks, whereas I cannot because I have already had my disaster week. I think it was week 6 or week 7 where I put up a 2-13 mark. So you're still hanging around there. But you're totally right to mention, this game, I was on the 49ers. We took them in the Circa contest. I took them in staff picks. I picked them in my articles. So I was highly leveraged on San Francisco. And, 10 minutes into this game in game time, you're thinking, I might be on the wrong side. Philly looks like the team that feels like they were disrespected. San Francisco had a lot of things to say. Philadelphia is acutely aware of what the line was for this game. And they come out, they do end up with 2 field goals on those first 2 drives. And that was huge. But they also forced 2 3-and-outs in which San Francisco gained a total of -6 yards. So even though they were leaving some points on the board, not being able to finish those drives, you still felt like, all right, the defense is looking really good. And they were running a ton of clock too. I mean, they burned off, almost 12 combined minutes between those first 2 drives. So you're shortening the game for a San Francisco offense that initially could not get anything going. But man, once the onslaught began for San Francisco, there was no slowing this team down. I mean, we typically, you don't see San Francisco get off to a lot of slow starts. And it was a little concerning just how poor the offense looked and how well schemed the Eagles were for those first 2 drives. But after that, 11-play touchdown drive, 10-play touchdown drive, 7-play touchdown drive, 5-play touchdown drive, 12-play touchdown drive, and then a 2-play touchdown drive. So 6 touchdown drives in a row for the 49ers. And, once they got rolling, Hurts goes out of the game with the possible concussion. We saw a few snaps of Marcus Mariota. Once that happened, you kind of felt like, the Eagles had fallen behind and were facing a deficit that they just couldn't surmount.
Yeah, and then Swift got hurt late. DeAndre Swift got hurt late in the game when the game was it was out of question. The game was over. And starters were still in. And, you might want to criticize Nick Sirianni for that. I don't know. Because anybody can get hurt at any time. And let's face it, NFL rosters aren't like college rosters where you have 90 players. You have a finite number of players. So resting your starters isn't necessarily a thing you can even do. But Swift does have an injury history. We're going to wait to see more about that. But he was taken to the locker room late in that game. Could be Kenneth Gainwell's season. We'll see. We might actually see Rashad Penny be activated for a game. Who knows? But we'll see.
They're keeping him on ice.
Yeah, so he's ready, coach. Put me in. That's another thing I got wrong this year. I just thought that Penny would have a say in this team, and he just hasn't. But we'll see. But yeah, all this, and they still have Dallas at Dallas next week. This Eagles schedule stretch is insane. Starting with Dallas before the bye week at home, which was a war. Then you get the bye, then you get at KC, then you get of course you get the Buffalo game, and now this one. And then Dallas on the road after that. Just a heck of a stretch.
Luckily they finish out with the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants, so it does come back around. But even after the Dallas game, you got to go to Seattle on a Monday night. I mean, that's not a gimme by any means. Obviously Seattle has been a bit down on its luck, and it's going through an equally difficult stretch of schedule, partially because they have to play the Eagles. But Seattle, you never want to play that team on the road, so it's going to be stiff for Philly. And if they lose this game against Dallas, it's going to get interesting as far as the top of the NFC East goes. I still think they're in the driver's seat right now. I think they feel pretty good about going into Dallas, but the way the Cowboys have played at home this season, you just never know. And I think for me, it's more of a test for Dallas at this point. Like, we still know, like, this is discouraging if you're an Eagles fan. Obviously, losing this game 42-19, and basically just allowing the Niners to turn into a freight train on offense for most of the game. Like, it doesn't make you feel great if you have a rematch at some point in the NFC playoffs. But I still think Philly, on balance, they have the one true slip up against the Jets. Every team is allowed, I think, one of those, maybe two. Other than that, like, they're still the team to me that I trust maybe only behind the 49ers as far as finding ways to win. So I don't think this is something that snowballs next week in Dallas. I still think we get a really close game, and I think the Eagles feel good about how they match up with that team.
Yeah. Dallas is at the peak of their game, though, too. Although defensively, maybe not as much. But one of the refreshing things we've seen is a lot of high-scoring games. Some New England accepted, and a few other pockets in the Northeast accepted. Goodness. We'll get to that. But there's a combined 63 points in this game, despite horrible weather. There was the shootout against Buffalo, despite horrible weather the week before. I had people asking, should I downgrade Purdy because of the weather? Like, no, don't. Not against the Eagles. Eagles do have some definite problems in their secondary. They may be without security guy Big Dom next week. Who knows? We'll see about that. But yeah, it's just, you can score against the Eagles, that's for sure. And the Niners seem to be getting better and better. Any other takeaways from this game?
I mean, this was a Deebo Samuel game. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a reminder. I'm always texting with my buddies during Sunday games, and I'm just like, Deebo Samuel's my favorite player, favorite non-Jag in the entire league. Like, if I could like build he's not the guy you'd want to start a franchise with by any means. Obviously, there's a bunch of quarterbacks and other players, but he is just, when he's rolling like he was, 3 touchdowns, 1 on the ground, 2 through the air, just bowling over guys. Like, when he's fully healthy, man, he is just such a weapon and so fun to watch. Fantasy wise, it actually ended up being still a decent day for the Eagles pass catchers. I mean, AJ Brown, 8 for 114, didn't get in the end zone, but had himself a nice game, 13 targets. Devontae Smith, 9 for 96, and to score. What it really came down to is, Philly was never able to run the ball, and it turned into a game where they couldn't really run the ball because you couldn't be chewing clock. But even early on, when they put together those drives, they weren't ripping off big plays. You don't really rip off big running plays against San Francisco in general, but that was something to monitor. And certainly we need to keep an eye on Jalen Hurts going forward. He returned to the game, was cleared without a concussion, but there's kind of been these lingering, like, is he banged up type of concerns. And now we have this on top of it. Do
you think doing all those tush push plays might be contributing to him getting a little banged up?
Maybe. I don't know. They make it look so easy that it's hard to imagine him. Obviously he's a big part of why it's so effective, but I guess, taking a pounding, you got defenders kind of diving at you. It's possible. But it's been so effective, and it's not like they're just barely getting these, right? I mean, there's a couple, they ran it once or twice in this game too, where it's like they need 1 yard, and sometimes they'll pick up 3 or 4. They're getting so much movement. So yeah, you don't want your quarterback taking that many hits, but I wouldn't say that's the primary reason. No.
Yeah, it's just something to kind of throw out there. I wonder the physical toll of that play. All right, the night game. Let's go there as the next, I think, impactful game. Green Bay. They pretty much were ahead most of the game in this one here. And they continue their strong play. Jordan Love played a pretty strong game. Christian Watson again stepping up. And the Chiefs offense, after looking good against the Raiders last week, went back to kind of looking pretty shaky again.
Yeah, I thought the Chiefs offense, up and down. Certainly, there were a couple drives at the end that were just kind of those vintage Kansas City situations, right, where they held Green Bay to a field goal, another long drive, and we'll talk about the Packers offense plenty. But Green Bay, takes over with about 11 minutes left in the fourth quarter, up 4, and or up 2, excuse me, at that point. And, they chew off like 4 or 5 minutes. They're held to a field goal after another really productive drive. They go right down the field. Kansas City defense, finally gets a big stop. And you're like, all right, it's a 1-score game. Patrick Mahomes getting the ball back. How many times did they mention on the broadcast? He's always wanted to play at Lambeau. This is his moment. And 2 plays later, he throws a pick to Keyshawn Nixon, right? I mean, we've had a few of these just kind of weird drives, weird plays by Patrick Mahomes this season. And that was a great play by Nixon to locate the ball. I don't think Mahomes ever really considered that the cornerback would have the ability to kind of turn around and make that play. Incredible play by Keyshawn Nixon. But those are the plays where in the past, that situation, it feels like the Chiefs always find a way to score a touchdown, right? And then it's on Green Bay to try to manufacture something at the end with Jordan Love. And, not only that, but, they force another field goal. It's an 8-point game. And, even with the controversial penalties on that drive, you didn't have that same kind of fear of Kansas City that you've had in the past, where everything has just felt inevitable. Like the air of invincibility with this offense just doesn't feel like it's there this season. I did think they played pretty well. Like the thing was, and Matt LaFleur, I thought, did a good job of highlighting this. I think it was either after the first quarter or after halftime. He said to the sideline reporter, there's just been like no possessions in this game, right? I mean, both teams were chewing up so much clock that it didn't really feel like, it was like an explosive offensive night for Kansas City by any means. And it wasn't, but they only had 2 true drives in the entire first half, right? I mean, they had
that's crazy.
And one of them was a 13-play drive. One of them was a 14-play drive. They scored on their first 4 drives of the game, but it didn't really feel that way.
Yeah. And you're right. Shortening the game against Mahomes seems like a really good idea. It's just, that's a good takeaway. And, the Packers are able to accomplish this despite not, I guess they didn't run poorly. AJ Dillon was fine.
Early on, he was running really well.
Yeah. 18 for 73. Taylor had a couple runs in there as well. They actually ran for 129 yards as a team. So that's a good way to chew up some clock too.
Yeah, I thought the Packers, I mean, that was really the most impressive thing to me. And a big part of the reason that I was on KC this week was I thought, okay, yeah, Green Bay's offense is moving in the right direction. And they absolutely hammered that point home last night emphatically. But I thought, okay, yeah, you did it against the Chargers. You did it against a Lions defense that almost blew a huge lead again this past week to the Saints. All right, I want to see you do it against KC's defense, because that's the defense that's been keeping this team in games. That's the reason they were 8-3 going into last night. And they did it, right? I mean, those first 2 drives those were 2 of the cleanest drives the Packers have had all year. I mean, they didn't even have a whole lot of those last year with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, those were every single play. It felt like, Jordan Love is picking the right option. He's wide open. I think he started 11 of 12 passing. I mean, it turned into kind of a masterclass by Love in the second half, but I thought he was just the creativity in the offense. Like, and Collinsworth mentioned it on the telecast a couple of times. He's like, this is the Matt LaFleur offense. This is not the Aaron Rodgers / Matt LaFleur where Aaron Rodgers is actually calling the shots offense. This is what Matt LaFleur wants to run when he has a quarterback who will actually cooperate with him. And that's what it felt like. We saw some of this early on in the season from Green Bay. You think back to week 1 against Chicago, like they're pulling out some trick plays, they're running more jet sweeps. And then it felt like they kind of got away from that in the early middle portion of the season when the offense had grinded to a halt. But now they're back to it. I mean, they had, everybody was getting in on the act. Like, obviously Christian Watson looked great. We'll have to keep an eye on that hamstring injury late. Yeah. This would now be like the 3rd or 4th time that the hamstring has been an issue for him. But yeah, I mean, Dobbs was in the mix, Dontavian Wicks, like Tucker Kraft, all of a sudden looks like a pretty viable tight end for a team that has a few options there. Like, it wasn't even a big night for Jaden Reed. I mean, they have a bunch of guys that I think they feel pretty comfortable, getting the ball out in space and making things happen. So that was the number one thing that stood out to me was Green Bay's consistency and the ease with which they move the ball on this Kansas City defense, especially in the first half. Although, I mean, how many injuries did the Chiefs have on the defensive side alone? I mean, there were 3 or 4 times where, it was enough of a stoppage that they had to send the game to commercial. So there was some attrition there for Kansas City. They were down to their 3rd string middle linebacker. I think that's part of it. But Green Bay and Jordan Love, man, I mean, it's pretty crazy that like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was talking to my friends about like, man, Green Bay might need to start looking at a quarterback in the draft. And I mean, that just seems silly now.
Yeah. It seems like they've got their franchise quarterback, which, hey, tip your hat to them for that. I mean, that's really a surprise. And, given how this season's going, but guess what? With reps, sometimes players improve. And, that's the thing that's really, that's really pretty funny about how our opinions change so rapidly on that there. And Christian Watson, for that matter, too. I can't make a contested catch is all of a sudden making contested catches. He can't stay healthy, but I think I saw on Twitter the Will Fuller comp. and that just like, oh no, that please don't be that. But yeah,
I actually think that's a pretty decent comp. I think Watson's peak is probably better. He should be a little more physical. He's certainly better built than Will Fuller ever was. But yeah, I see why that makes sense. Watson he brought down a couple contested catches early. The touchdown catch, initially it looked like a contested catch, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Watson. That was just a perfectly thrown ball by Jordan Love. Like, it didn't actually end up being contested. Like, the defender played it as well as he possibly could have. He jumped at the perfect time and just couldn't get there. It was thrown in the one spot where it was an inch over his hand, but it was right into the hands and right into the target zone for Christian Watson. And you could just see, the confidence that Jordan Love was picking up as this game went along. It looked like they somewhat controversially decided to go for it on 4th and 1, and Love is flushed out of the pocket. He's backing up. You're like, oh boy. And just, I think the throw of the year for him, dropping that in to Romeo Doubs, inside the red zone.
Yeah. Just a dime, man. You love seeing it there. Pacheco looked good for the Chiefs until he got ejected for fighting. How would you grade
that'll happen? Like, sometimes you just got to punch somebody with a helmet on.
Yeah, that's always smart play. How would you grade the punch? Good form?
Well, he went with the left. I don't know if he's left-handed or not. I think it's insane. Like, it takes a special kind of person who's willing to just throw. That was an all-out punch right into a helmet, and he's just like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. So yeah, he didn't really protest the ejection, right? By the time they announced it, he was already walking to the locker room. So I think he knew what he did.
Yes, it was towards the end too. But he had a 100-yard game, and that was the one thing that is kind of working for them offensively. Yeah, it's just Rashee Rice is, he's getting better and better. He's getting to be an important part of that offense, but still, it just seems like they're just a little bit off. All right. What's not off is being on the Blue Wire Network. We always like being on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. All right, we are back. Thank you for indulging us with the Blue Wire Network ads. Let's move on to Miami, Washington. Nick, I actually took the Commanders to cover, thinking, oh, it's just too much. And then 12 seconds into the game, I'm like, I've made a huge mistake. And this was so bad. This is like not even close. They were playing a lot of man on Tyreek Hill, which just strikes me as a really bad idea.
Yeah. Commanders punted on their first possession, and it took Miami 3 plays to jump out to a 7-0 lead. That was the first long touchdown from Tua to Tyreek on the day. Just a classic Tyreek Hill play, right? Ran right past the defender. Great throw from Tua. We saw one later where they had Tyreek Hill almost lined up as like a H-back, kind of like an offset tight end. He's in a 3-point stance, and just nobody really picked him up. Tua floats a perfect ball down the field for another long one. You're right. You got the feeling early on that Washington wasn't going to keep up. Like, we knew Miami was going to score. That was something I was pretty confident in. The reason that we didn't take Miami in the Circa contest is we're thinking, like, man, this could be 40-33. They're down Jalen Phillips. Like, maybe this is the week that Sam Howell and this Washington offense gets back on track and they could keep up. No, it was just never really a consideration. Just another beatdown from Miami. I know some people had concerns about this Dolphins team traveling. Not a great surface in Washington. It was kind of foggy out there. It just didn't really seem to bother Miami whatsoever. This was a complete romp. I believe I did make this my best bet in staff pick. So in retrospect, I wish I would have picked or pushed a little bit harder to use this one in the Circa contest. But just a pretty classic Dolphins Commanders game in 2023. I think there was a case to be made for Washington keeping up, but I do think, when especially in retrospect, you look back and you're like, all right, if you play this game out 10 times, 50 times, 100 times, like, Miami winning by multiple scores is probably the most common result. And Washington right now, man, this is a sinking ship. And you kind of forget that they dealt away, 2 big defensive pieces at the deadline. And that certainly showed up yesterday.
Yeah. Sam Howell was terrible in this game. Fantasy wise, he got you 2 rushing touchdowns. So that was fine. That was great. But the pick 6 was horrible. He was 12 of 23. He got sacked only 3 times, but this was just a wash of a game. And, Terry McLaurin got shut out. Sam Howell is not good for Terry McLaurin. I think we can establish this.
Yeah, I know. And even like the weeks this year where Sam Howell has gone off and put up a ton of yards, it hasn't been Terry McLaurin benefiting. This is his lowest point now, just 3 targets yesterday. Sam Howell, 12 of 23 in a game that you were down 17-0 in the first quarter. Washington just could not get anything going. And you mentioned the pick six. I mean, threw it right to, I believe it was Van Ginkel, right? Yep. Yeah, I mean, the classic, linebacker, defensive end interception. Like that actually, that's really what I think kind of set off the blowout, because Miami was already cruising at that point, but Miami had just come off a disaster 3-and-out where they lost a bunch of yards. Washington had a sack. There was a penalty. And Washington was taking over at like the 40-yard line. It was their best field position of the entire day. And if there was ever a time for them to get something going and try to keep this close, that would have been it. First play of the drive, pick six the other way. It's 17-0. And even though Washington did put together a touchdown drive after that, you never really felt like they had a chance. And I mean, it was 31-7 at the half. This was another game. Miami's had a few of these this year where they called off the dogs in the second half. I mean, they easily could have had 50 plus if they wanted.
We saw a White Lotus, Mike White in there again. It was one of those games. Devon Achane got 2 touchdowns in the second half. His return definitely hurts Mostert's volume, but Mostert did at least get a score to kind of salvage his day. And they kind of, like you said, they kind of took the foot off the pedal there in the second half. That game ended early, mercifully. It was one of those, not as early as Chargers New England, but still early.
This was like an NBA game where a team's up 30 going into the fourth. I mean, you just look at the snap counts. Like Tyreek Hill played 31 snaps. Jalen Waddle played 37 snaps. I mean, you basically played like a half game for some of your key players. So that's big when you get this late in the season. You've had your bye already. Not having to overextend players like that in these situations is something that I think is a little bit underrated. Snap wise, Achane 37, 23 for Mostert. Again, given the game flow, kind of hard to say exactly what that means, but this is kind of the first actual return game for Achane because he got hurt so early a couple of weeks ago, and I still think we might need a little bit more of a sample to see what that split is going to be. They got the Titans and the Jets the next 2 weeks, so better run defenses than the Commanders certainly, but still games that you could see kind of turning into laughers in favor of Miami.
Yeah, and they could go into the Christmas weekend at 11-3. But they finished with Cowboys, Ravens, and Bills. So
the Cowboys game is going to be, oh my God, that's going to be so much fun. That one's in Miami.
Yes. I'm very much looking forward to that. Kind of reminiscent of Miami, Green Bay last year, where I was looking forward to that one. And then Tua got concussed, and it wasn't so much fun anymore. So, but yeah, this is one where definitely kind of circle that one there, and yeah, we'll see. You're looking forward to that. But they're in pretty good shape there. Washington finally gets their bye along with Arizona. Week 14 bye. So weird.
Yeah, very weird. I was talking about that with some guys this weekend, and it's like it's equally weird to take your bye in like week 5. I think that's the earliest you could do it. I think week 14 is the worst, right? And it's like, is it a coincidence that 2 of the worst teams in the NFL have it in week 14? Maybe not.
Who hated owners, at least
right.
previously in the case of Washington, but yeah.
Week 14, man, it feels like the season's basically over. It's like, what are you doing taking it in week 14? I don't know how much choice these teams actually have, but
in this case, both those teams, it is over pretty much, despite Arizona's performance this week.
Yeah. Those are 2 teams I'm okay just leave it off the schedule for a week. That's fine.
Indeed. One more one more note from the Miami side, question from Lindorphins asking, where would you be ranking Achane going forward in a half-point PPR league?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say, like, give like an actual number. I'm pretty high on it, man. Like, I think this is
me too.
It's something that's tough to quantify for fantasy, but like, I think Miami's like excited to get him back and they want to get him integrated, right? Like, I don't think this is a early season Jahmyr Gibbs situation where it's like, oh, we got to get him up to speed. It's like, no, this guy is a weapon for this offense, and I think they want to show him off. And I think against the Jets and the Titans these next couple of weeks, again, those aren't exactly like plus run defenses in terms of matchup, but I don't even know if it matters really for Miami. The way that they're able to scheme up against inferior teams talent-wise, I think those should be good spots. I mean, the Dallas game, that could easily be a game that's played in the 40s. And I try to use that pretty judiciously, but I think the way that both of these offenses and really both these defenses are playing right now, that could be a shootout game. So I want him in the lineup, no question. I mean, again, it's hard to say. You have to look at the matchups week to week. But like, how about just Achane versus Mostert? Like, how close are those guys going to be in your value meter?
I already had Achane like 10 spots ahead of Mostert this past week because Achane can be a top 3 guy in a given week. Mostert, I mean, he could be.
He needs touchdowns.
And he's been getting touchdowns. Was he up to 17 or something like that? Yes. Or 14 rushing touchdowns so far and 2 receiving ones for
He's also stopped catching passes lately as well. Yes. That's something to monitor. Even when Achane was still out, Mostert has 3 total catches over the last 6 games.
Yep. That's right. So I would put HN in my top 10. And I take him over Josh Jacobs.
Yes.
I take Kamara ahead of him. I'm looking at our half point PPR rankings, and mine are a little bit different than the official site ones, but I take him over Swift. I take him over Walker. Who knows with the injury, his Walker's injury status. HN would be pretty high on my list. Yeah.
Well, so, I think you said it. There's something to be said for the true upside, right? Where it's like, Mostert, you can still argue on some weeks Mostert is maybe the safer option. So it kind of depends on your situation. Like if you're kind of treading water, and you're looking for like a Hail Mary, like, all right, I need to win 4 of my last 5 or whatever, depending on what format you're in, or 2 of your next 3. I think you go HN, right, over whatever comparable option there might be, because you're not going to feel great about it if you miss out on the 38-point week, because that he's one of very few guys in the league that can give you that.
Exactly. Dynasty question: HN or Breece Hall?
Ooh. Oh man. That is so tough.
It is.
I think HN. I think HN, right? I don't know. It depends. I mean, I think both of those running back groups could look very different next year. I think both guys are installed, within their offenses. But you also, like, the clock is also 1 year behind on HN when it comes to, like, I don't think running back negotiations are going to go a whole lot better in the future. And Breece Hall is 1 year ahead in terms of the contract stuff. So if you're looking like next 2 to 3 years and perhaps beyond, I think I would go HN.
Yeah, and there's no sign that the Jets' offensive line is going to be any good, and who knows what they're going to be able to do next year. But their line is so trash right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you all you have to do any given week is look at Breece Hall's rushing numbers. Right. They're horrific, and it's not.
Aaron Rodgers is not single-handedly solving that. Like I want a piece of the Dolphins' offense. If you think they're pretty comparable players, which I think they are, I'd rather have the guy that plays for the Dolphins than the Jets.
Indeed. We're going to talk Indy, Tennessee, and the best. Early slate game. But before we do that, a quick note from our friends at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook. Circa Sports for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. Let's talk a little Colts and Titans. This game was all over the map. There was a lot going on this one. Tennessee jumped them early. Derrick Henry looked good early, 2 early touchdowns. Second half, the Tennessee offense just went shuttered until very late. And then, of course, we had all sorts of special team shenanigans. The Colts with the rally in overtime. This was a very entertaining game.
This was an unbelievably entertaining game. I would say if just pure entertainment value, this is up there with any game that we've seen this season. Like, we had some ultra unique plays. We had a kicker punting. We had Ryan Tannehill stepping in as a holder at one point because the Titans punter took like 2 of the hardest hits that you'll ever see a punter take, including one that looked like it was going to snap his leg. And the second of 2 block punts for the Indianapolis Colts, one of which was returned for a touchdown, and then the Colts go for 2, and it's picked off and returned all the way for 2 points for Tennessee. And then the next one, they block another one, get it at like the 6-yard line, and have to settle for a field goal. So, 2 massive game-swinging plays. Like, I'd have to look up like how many teams block 2 kicks in a game and then still almost lose that game. Like, Indy obviously barely squeaked this one out in overtime. Like, especially where they block those, right? I mean, one of them turns directly into a touchdown. One of them, you're set up like deep in the red zone and not able to finish that out. Just a bizarre game on so many levels. I love Gardner Minshew. I will defend him to the death. I love and honor what he did as a member of the Jaguars. I'm also glad he's not the Jaguars quarterback, because like this goes down as a good Gardner Minshew game.
Yes.
There are still, I mean, the amount of chaotic plays that this guy makes. Like, he very nearly threw a game-losing screen pass with 20 seconds on the clock. Like, that was, and right after that, Indy's like, we're shutting it down. We're just taking a knee. We can't risk
I saw that.
It was unbelievable. I mean, it was just such a classic Gardner Minshew play. Like, if you're like, who's the number 1 quarterback that would throw a pick 6 on a 2-point conversion attempt, you'd be like, all right, one, Jameis Winston, who we did see, and we'll talk about in a little bit, and two, Gardner Minshew. I mean, he is. People joke that he's white Jameis, but he actually is, man. Like it's unbelievable how many risks he's willing to take. How, like in that situation at the end of the game, like you're looking to maybe, you have like a 5% chance to hit some sort of big play and maybe get a field goal off. The last thing you need to do is throw the ball directly into the arms of a defender who is very, very close to picking that off and probably rumbling in for a touchdown. I mean, it was the full Gardner Minshew experience. It was the full Indianapolis Colts experience, really, in a lot of ways. I mean, the Colts were generating some big plays. They were digging deep into the playbook, ran a couple trick plays that went well for them. But at the same time, this is not a defense that I have a lot of trust in right now. And, Tennessee ran the ball well early in this game. Still, like you said, the offense kind of grinded to a halt in the second half. But Indy's the type of team that we say all the time, like they can hang in with anybody. They can also lose to anybody. And allowing 28 points to the Titans, that is a red flag for this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Gardner Minshew is Uncle Rico. He has the weird throwing motion. It all fits. Just the facial hair, all that. God, that play right before overtime. Oh my goodness. That was such a bad throw. And then yet he drops a dime on the deep ball. He unlocks Alec Pierce. And they almost played like that whole game setting up the overtime play for Pierce. It was pretty funny. Will Levis, not great. He and DeAndre Hopkins got into it on the sidelines. I think it was more like Levis yelling at Hopkins more than anything else instead of the other way around. And they did improve after that for a little bit. Chig had a really bad drop, but he also had like a big play early on, which was nice to see him actually involved a little bit. The Titans run weird plays. They run like these like tight end jet sweeps. It's like Arthur Smith's not there anymore, but he's still there in spirit. I don't know.
Well, the Colts were doing the same thing. I mean, Kylan Granson, was running the ball. He was like way too involved for my taste in this one. Like you mentioned, Chig ran the ball. Very weird game all around. Tajay Spears actually looked pretty good again. 16 for 75. He and Henry combined for almost 180 yards, but it took him 37 carries to get there. So it was not an overly efficient day necessarily for Tennessee. We had one of the more unique plays that you'll ever see. Will Levis throwing what appeared to be an interception, immediately knowing that it was a bad throw, and then sprinting to make the tackle and force a fumble on the Indianapolis Colts, which I don't think I've ever seen that. A quarterback like following his shot like in an NBA game. Yeah,
and they officially ruled it a fumble. So he knew. I think that was the thing. The awareness factor was high. And then because it was a fumble, they didn't have to rule whether it was a catch or not by the defender. And the tackle by Levis and the recovery. I mean, it was great awareness. Got him a first down because of that there. But wow. Not a great offensive game for Tennessee, despite them getting the points early. But that's every Tennessee game. As we alluded to, they're at Miami. We get a double Monday nighter here again at the same time this time too. Very odd schedule. I just noticed that. Wow.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were at the same time. I knew we had two this week, and you're right. Both at 7:15. Packers, Giants, Titans, Dolphins. Okay,
oh, good. Giants on primetime again. Oh, lucky us.
Why we have flex scheduling, right? These are two big markets. I think there's a reason that this game is not flexed, and I know there's exclusive TV rights and whatnot. It's a little bit. It's actually much more difficult than people realize, I think, to flex these games. But
sure.
Packers have become a fun team to watch, so at least that'll be interesting. But yeah, Titans, Dolphins, we'll see. I don't see that one going very well for Tennessee, who is, I don't know if they're mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. I don't think they are, but this was the one. I mean, this was the one that they absolutely needed to have if they had any hope. Yeah.
ESPN page, I look at their schedule, their schedule page, and they have a link to tickets. There are so many games now where the tickets are super low. Jets are at home again this week. Yeah. Tickets as low as $21. Tickets for that Giants Monday night game as low as $30. They're not going to sell out. It's pretty clear. Yeah. But yeah, at least we don't have
the rest of the way too. I mean, they go Dolphins, Texans, Seahawks, Texans, Jags. I mean, there might not be another win on there. We'll see how Tennessee handles that.
Yeah. So we'll move on from them. You alluded a little bit to, so Henry, by the way, concussion. We got to check to see what his status is this week. Obviously, Tajay Spears, if he's available in your leagues, will be a very hot pickup.
They did say this morning that Henry is not concussed. That came straight from Vrabel. So I don't think he misses any time. But either way, I think you want to pick up Tajay Spears because, even though they're not mathematically eliminated, I think they know where they are. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more Spears just to kind of take some of the workload off of Henry the rest of the way. Tennessee also did fire its special teams coordinator this morning as well.
Shocking. Shocking.
Yeah, hard to see what led to that.
Yeah. And by the way, the punter is out for the season. I mean, he couldn't even get it off his leg on the second one there. It was so bad.
Oh man, yeah. Both of them were. Those were as easy of a pump block as you'll ever see. I thought the second one was somehow more egregious than the first.
Yeah, you can't put it on the punter there at that point in time. Okay, Detroit, New Orleans. Detroit absolutely jumped the Saints in the first quarter of this game. The Saints rallied, actually had a legitimate chance to win this one.
Yeah,
and we were, the thing that we were clamoring for is to see Jameis Winston out there. This is why we don't see Jameis Winston out there. He was terrible. Just horrible in this game. The one big pass play he had was on a tip play. It would have been picked off twice, possibly. The fourth down throw was just, he missed Olave on 3rd and 4th down on the final drive, and they were both terrible throws when Olave was open. This is why we don't see Jameis, because bad Jameis exists.
Unfortunately, you're right. I know. I love watching Jameis. I think the Saints are they're a more fun team with Jameis out there. I mean, Carr was not great in this game either, although he was the one that really, kind of got them back into it. Really, it was more so Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. Mm-hmm. Nice day for Olave. 119 yards on 5 catches, 8 targets, about the usual from Kamara. 6 catches on 8 targets. Not overly effective on the ground, but did give you 2 touchdowns. So big fantasy day for him. Just a bizarre game. I mean, this one felt like it was over. And you're thinking like, man, Detroit might win this thing by 30. Never really expected New Orleans to get back into it. Detroit, after coming out strong, they're up 21-0. They end up punting, and I think 3 or 4 possessions in a row. Did get a big touchdown from Jameson Williams. This came, right after a fumble by the New Orleans Saints. That was a Derek Carr fumble. That was at the time that New Orleans had kind of fully made its charge. They had gone on a 21-3 run at that point. And that was a huge, huge drive. So, first play of the drive, you force a fumble deep in Saints territory. And then a really nice, kind of reverse play to Jameson Williams, who essentially just ran in untouched. And you saw the raw speed from Williams, like getting him the ball when he's already moving. My goodness. I mean, that looked like Jameson Williams at Alabama. I mean, he's one of those guys that jumps off the screen, even in the NFL, as far as how much faster he's moving than everybody else. So Detroit getting that score was big, but New Orleans still put together a nice drive after that. They come back down. Get it back to a 1-score game, force a quick 3-and-out by Detroit. And then, like you said, Jameis is in the game at this point. The Olave throw on 4th down was just so bad. I think it was kind of a timing route. You could say maybe they weren't on the same page, but Olave was open. I mean, that's a throw you just got to make. I thought Jameis actually threw it. He threw it a little too early. I think he thought Olave was going to break one way and Olave broke the other way. That's at least what it looked like to me. And I think if Jameis just waits like another, quarter of a second, he sees where Olave is going, and that's an easy completion to keep that drive going.
Absolutely. And the play before too, Olave broke wide open and he threw it behind him again and all that. Now Olave makes some mistakes every once in a while. Derek Carr actually threw a decent deep ball, slightly underthrown. Olave should have come down with it and didn't, but I mean, he made another great catch later in the drive too. So tough to totally rip on either quarterback. Juwan Johnson had a bad non-catch that led to an interception, ended up getting shut out in this game after, we thought he might be doing a lot more with Shaheed out. Instead, it turned out he didn't. Olave was able to play at least. So he was the rare concussed guy that actually was able to play and had a pretty big day just without getting into the end zone. Taysom Hill it was very effective. So this was my, I have Red Zone on one TV and the other the local. I usually have a local game, and this was the local one, so I saw pretty much every play of this game already. Didn't have to do the rewatch, and the announcers it's so funny. They bemoaned Taysom Hill being taken out of the game when he got to the 1-yard line, and Kamara got the touchdown. But Kamara had a touchdown taken off the books where Hill got the touchdown, so it was like the universe was writing itself there. I thought.
Yeah, I mean, Hill also fumbled in the red zone last week, so I get it. Does this game does it do anything for your defensive concerns about Detroit? The total yardage for the Saints came in at about 362. They outgained Detroit. They ran 11 more plays. They had more first downs. They were effective on 3rd down. Obviously, good on Detroit for hanging on to win. But I think if you're a Lions fan, man, you kind of felt like, all right, early on, this is the team that we thought we had. We're back to where we were 3 weeks ago after those weird games against Chicago and Green Bay. I don't know, man. Detroit So I think the gap between Philly and San Francisco, and maybe San Francisco and everybody else, feels like it kind of continues to widen each week. And Detroit now, to me, even though they're going to end up being a higher seed than Dallas or Philly, they are very, very clearly to me a rung below those other three teams.
Honestly, I'm more concerned about the offense than the defense.
Really?
Because they scored on short fields, right? They got that early lead and they got shut down for pretty much all the way until the end. And they scored on another short field on the reverse. I love the gratuitous leap by Williams, by the way, on the scoring in the end zone there.
Love it.
I didn't have to do that. He got up pretty high though, too. It was pretty cool.
That was the old like USC Reggie Bush, dive into a front flip or something more of a somersault, I suppose. But yeah,
exactly.
If I scored a touchdown in the NFL, I would absolutely get it. Celebration penalty. So I'm all for all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, not a whole lot else to say in this game. I mean, Sam Laporta, arguably best game of the year, 9 for 140, caught all 9 of his targets, had a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown, only 2 catches. They were both big ones though. One of them went for a touchdown. Yeah, just kind of a weird game for Detroit. Like you said, a lot of short fields. Derek Carr got his weekly terrible interception out of the way on his first pass of the entire game, which came right after a dominant touchdown drive by Detroit, and it kind of set off, what seemed like was going to be a blowout. The one thing I actually had in my notes for this game, and it's completely like irrelevant, but it to me just kind of sums up who the Saints are. There was a play, I believe it was a 3rd down. It was like 3rd and 8 or something. And Derek Carr drops back. Nobody's open. He sees Taysom Hill out in the flat, looks at him, notices that he's covered, looks back to the middle of the field, and then turns and throws it to Taysom Hill anyway, who's tackled immediately as he's hit. As he catches the ball. Like, what are you doing? I mean, that is the epitome of the Saints offense at this point, is just knowing that whatever play I make here, we're not getting the first down.
Saints fans are booing every time Carr comes on the field and Taysom Hill comes off. It's not a pretty. Well,
we'll see about Carr next week too. I mean, he ended up in concussion protocol. He had a shoulder injury and a rib injury. So I know it seems like the shoulder is not as severe as maybe they initially thought. But I think the confluence of those 3 things could add up to a Jameis start next week.
It could very well, and all that comes with that. All right, Houston, Denver, last of the good early games. And this was kind of this was kind of disappointing, but when it's like in the context of every other Denver game lately, it makes a little bit more sense. This was kind of a grinded out sort of game for Houston after they jumped them early, got that 13-0 lead. And then it took them a while to do a whole lot else. Dameon Pierce got the touchdown and got more carries than Devin Singletary this week, because of course he did. I'm kind of annoyed at the Texans for that, by the way. Singletary was the more effective per carry back. They just decided this is the week we're going to force Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, that was surprising. It was a little strange. In terms of snaps, Singletary actually did out-snap him, but was used more in passing situations. 8 carries on 31 snaps for Singletary, 15 carries on 26 snaps for Dameon Pierce. So basically, if he was out there, he was going to be involved. We saw a little bit of Daria Gubawale as well. Probably a little bit more of him than we needed as a running back, not a kicker, mind you. I mean, obviously, the big news coming out of this is the Tank Dell injury, which is just brutal, man. I mean, one of the most fun players in the league. I mean, having a really, really strong rookie season. And, I don't know that the absence of Tank Dell, he's going to miss the rest of the year. We know that. I don't think this like knocks the Texans out of playoff contention or anything like that. But if they get in, it's like not having Tank Dell, it lowers the ceiling to me for this offense, which the ceiling is still pretty high. But Tank Dell was such an integral part of what they were doing, especially trying to get big plays downfield. And you take him out of the equation, and this team is still really fun, but they're missing their most fun piece.
Yeah, that's right. And how he got hurt, blocking on a goal line situation there. He's not a blocker. Stop! Don't put him.
And they had literally just flashed a graphic that said he's so small, he's 165 pounds. That's so rare. And then 2 minutes of real time later, he's being carted off.
Oh, and it was an immediate visceral reaction from his team too. I mean, that was
we had a few of those this week, man. It felt like there were so many cart stoppages, and you just hate to see it. And it sucks, man. But still a huge win for Houston at home. They hang on for the cover. This was one that literally came down to the final play of the game.
Yep.
Denver doing what they do, finding a way to even after Russell Wilson throws a second crushing interception to Derek Stingley, big stop by the Broncos defense. And drive all the way down the field. You're in pretty good position. First and goal at the 8 with 23 seconds left, and Russell Wilson for the most part has done a really good job of taking care of the ball, especially over these last 5 games that they had won coming into this one. But 3 interceptions for Russell Wilson, and obviously that last one was the biggest.
Yeah, there was a sequence in the fourth quarter where it went Stroud fumbles on third down, and the Broncos had like 4 chances to recover that play.
That was unbelievable. If I was a Broncos fan, I mean, a guy jumped on it. I don't know how he didn't. Like the ball just somehow didn't end up in his possession. His entire body was on the ball.
It was crazy. Punt, then interception, then Houston touchdown. I mean, that was the game right there. Because Denver scored after that to make it 22-17, but still they couldn't get the 2 scores. I mean, that's a huge, massive swing there, and they couldn't fully recover from that. Houston goes on the road at the Jets next week. Going to be a tough matchup for CJ Stroud. I mean, every quarterback that goes to face the Jets on the road, and they've had a bunch of them go into New York, a bunch of top ones go in, have struggled against the Jets. I don't expect a big game, especially now with no Tank Dell.
I don't expect a big game per se, but I still think he could do all right. Taking Dell out of the equation is pretty huge, and we'll see what the status is of Noah Brown, who was banged up coming into the week. Excuse me, but yeah, they're going to need somebody to step up. I don't know if Robert Woods is that guy. We did see more John Mechie after Tank Dell went out. He played 24 snaps. It's a bit more than he's typically been playing, but it was really Collins and Brown who were the 2 primary guys. So I think Nico Collins, rest of season, his arrow is up, not for the reasons that we would like, but he's still a big time fantasy receiver. And I think the Jets, it's an interesting matchup because Houston can't run the ball. The Jets are great at stopping the run. I think the Jets know that they can't run the ball. It's like, does Houston even try? Like I think it'd still be a really good game for CJ Stroud fantasy wise, because I think it's going to be high volume by default.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'm curious to see what role Noah Brown has, because he played 50 snaps, but only had the 2 targets. Even after, Dell gets hurt early, Brown was so huge in weeks 9 and 10. Actually, even in week 8 against Carolina, he had a role there too. So he had these 3 weeks where he was pretty good. And then, he's obviously missed the last 2, but I don't know. I think they kind of need him now. I think they need that for some balance. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to be Nico Collins, and Nico Collins with an occasional Brevin Jordan sprinkled in. We'll see what happens.
Brevin Jordan looked pretty good, by the way.
He did, by the way.
He can move, man. Like he doesn't really look like a tight end. Like he's kind of almost a hybrid, Kyle Pittsy type of player, and doesn't have quite as much size as Pitts. So I actually like what I saw from him. I'll be curious to see if they try to integrate him a little bit more without Tank Dell. Obviously, they didn't have Dalton Schultz this week, and that's why we saw more of Brevin Jordan. But nonetheless, huge win. This was a monster swing game. One of the most important singular games that we've had so far this season as far as playoff standings are concerned. And now, obviously, this gives Houston a leg up on Denver. Great day, by the way, for the Buffalo Bills as they try to hang around in the AFC. You got Pittsburgh losing, you got Cleveland losing, then you knew at least one, if Houston and Denver was going to lose. Obviously, the Colts getting a win, that was not great. But overall, on balance, 3 teams ahead of you taking a loss. That's pretty big for Buffalo. And I still think the Bills find a way to sneak in.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we'll see. Does 10-7 get it done?
I think so. I don't think all of, if it doesn't get it done, that maybe it comes down to tiebreakers, but it's like, is Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Indy, and or Houston, are all those teams getting to 11? I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Pittsburgh is, we're going to get to them in a second here, but their chances took a huge blow yesterday.
Huge. Yeah.
We'll talk about that game next, in fact. But first, before we do that, quick note from our other sponsor, Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pitch you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. Okay, let's talk a little Arizona and Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett, he's going to be out for a while. Just had surgery this morning for that high ankle sprain. This is devastating game for Pittsburgh. Era of good feelings. Their first drive, they're rolling. They had to settle for 3, though. And then the 3-3 game, Pickett gets hurt, and the whole game changed after that. They go for it on 4th and goal from the 1. They get stopped on the 1. Najee Harris gets stuffed. Arizona drives the whole length of the field to score and goes up 10-3. And then 2 weather delays. The game just ended about 12 minutes ago. And Pittsburgh still has not figured things out. They're going to be without Pickett for at least 3 to 4 weeks, I'm guessing, with the high ankle injury there. They're not putting him on IR yet, but this is just a devastating loss for Pittsburgh.
Devastating loss for Pittsburgh. Devastating loss for me personally. I'm not looking forward to talking to our guy Brandon Kravitz on the show because
that's right.
We went head to head on this one. I was all the Steelers. Like this was, I think this is my biggest miss of the season. I thought Pittsburgh minus 5.5 was a bargain. I did not think that Arizona would get anywhere close to 24 points in this game. Like I was up on the soapbox saying, man, even if Pittsburgh leaves a bunch of points on the table, like they could win 16-10, just like they did last week against Cincinnati. This was a top-down disaster game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I even went over to the local Potawatomi sportsbook here, Jeff, on Saturday. During the college football games, I was hanging out with some buddies there. We went to the book, wanted to check it out, and I put together some nice parlays for the day just for fun. And the Steelers sunk every single one of those. Left a lot of money on the table because Pittsburgh, even some of them were just Pittsburgh money line. And I was like, you know what? This is the game I feel most confident about. I got to make sure I tie in the Steelers. And you just knew right away, man. It was like they had to settle for a field goal on their first drive. Like Pittsburgh looked great to start this game. They drive right down the field. It's 1st and 10 at the Arizona 15, and they can't pick it up from there. But you're like, all right, settle for a field goal, whatever. After that, there was virtually nothing for the Steelers offense, and not only being stuffed at the goal line on that 4th and 1, but then allowing a 15-play, 99-yard touchdown drive before the half. I mean, that was insult to injury. And then, you mentioned the weather delays, right? I mean, there were 2 long weather delays. The first one was probably 30 to 40 minutes. They come back, and then it was like 2 hours. I mean, that in that situation, it's like sometimes you think, all right, maybe this helps the home team, but it did not. Pittsburgh looked like the same team coming out of the weather delay. Mitch Trubisky ends up coming in for Kenny Pickett. Fumbled snap on his first drive. Didn't really know if that was his fault. It was kind of a bad snap, but still one that he should have at least been able to dive on. Like didn't really make much of an effort to even recover the football. That leads directly to another Arizona touchdown. And look, Matt Canada or not, Kenny Pickett or not, even when the Steelers are playing good offense, they're not a team that's built to come back from down 17-3. And they're certainly not built to come back from 24-3, which is what this game ended up being at one point in the fourth quarter. So yeah, just a huge no-show by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I thought the defense looked horrible. TJ Watt was completely invisible, ended up getting banged up in the second half of this game. It's funny. The Steelers always say like, well, when Pickett goes out, there's no change. We feel great about Mitchell Trubisky. He's just uninspiring, man. You could argue that he's not that big of a step down from Pickett, but I have nearly the same level of trust in him. And it looks like that's who we're going to be looking at going forward because I don't think Kenny Pickett's playing again, at least in the regular season. Luckily, they do play the Patriots this week. That's still a game that I think you can win. After that, Colts, Bengals, Seahawks, Ravens. I think this Steelers team is teetering right now. And if I had to bet it, I don't think they make the playoffs. But at the same time, you got the Cleveland Browns, who are now in a very similar boat, if not worse.
Right. Well, we could see both of those teams dropping out of it very easily. I mean, you could see like Denver and Buffalo.
The Bills are getting it.
Yeah, I could see it. The Bills have a scheduling problem, but I think they're still like the talent's still there for sure. Sorry about that. A little sniffle. Who knows? Maybe the Chargers still have some life. Although I don't know. Let's talk about that game. Let's talk about that game. We're at the part of the schedule now where we can whip through these games because very little to talk about. Quentin Johnson dropped another ball. Blah blah blah. Chargers dropped 6 balls of the team. You can't run the ball, and they're the winning side of this 6-0 travesty of a game. I know it was windy, but come on.
Yeah, man, this was as ugly as it possibly could have been. I don't really know how we got over 500 yards of total offense in this game. I think we need to go back and double check the stats. It doesn't really add up to the product on the field. One of my best bets this week, Jeff, was Austin Eckler under 51.5 rushing yards. The Chargers had 29 rushing yards as a team in this game. 29 as a team. Austin Eckler, 14 carries, 18 yards.
Awful.
Josh Kelly, no more effective whatsoever. This was it was an awful watch. I think we actually set a new record this season for fewest time spent on red zone in any game. Like I think red zone flashed to this game literally 3 total times over like a 3.5 hour period.
I mean, why would you? I mean, it was so bad. They did it. There's a couple of times here and there, but you had Rhamondre getting hurt early on too. That was horrible. Bailey Zappi is Mac Jones. I mean, who knew? Except everybody. If you're following Tankathon, this was good for the Pats. Mike Doria sent me a link of that one there. So he is absolutely following that. If you're the Pats, do you prefer Drake May or do you prefer Caleb Williams?
I'm still a Caleb Williams guy. You know, I think there's more upside there. I think he's suffering from being in the limelight for too long, which happens to a ton of major prospects, whether they turn out to be good or not. But when you're the projected number 1 pick and you're still not even draft eligible, you really have nowhere to go but down from there. And I think Caleb Williams, given the circumstances, has still had a hell of a season, especially a hell of a first half at USC. And I think, you know, when you're kind of considered this like perfect prospect, again, the only thing you can really do at that point is have people take shots at you. So I think just by virtue of having to play out this season with the ridiculous, unrealistic expectations that he had, it feels like his stock is on the decline. But I think a lot of NFL people would tell you that he's, you know, still an all-time quarterback prospect. So that's the guy I would want personally.
I agree.
But we'll see. I think Jaden Daniels, you know, might be able to work his way into the mix. Obviously, May is going to be there. You know, we'll see on guys like Bo Nix and Michael Penix, you know, how high their draft stock is. I don't think they'll be in like the top 3 conversation, but there will be options. And, you know, that was another thing, Jeff, that I was looking at, you know, late last night when I couldn't sleep because I just had football on the mind. Like, how many teams going into the 2024 draft could you make a case, you know, are quarterback needy, right? I mean, it's almost half the league.
More than ever, it feels like. Yeah.
I mean, there are like 8 or 9 obvious ones. And then you have situations, you know, like the New York Jets, for example, or I don't know, like the Denver Broncos, teams that have a quarterback, but only might have that quarterback for one more year. And you know, you start to think like, oh, do they want to do like the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers type of plan? I mean, there are just so many teams right now that are needy, and it's a good quarterback class. It's a deep quarterback class. It's going to be fun to watch a lot of these guys next year, but there aren't enough that we're just going to, you know, magically have great quarterback play next season. I think it could actually play out a lot like this one, where some teams are just going to be kind of left off the merry-go-round.
Yeah, I think so too. And we've also seen the importance of having good backups, and there's only so many of those around too.
Yeah.
I mean, Andy Dalton's not walking through every door here. You know, it's one of the biggest paradoxes for me this year is that nobody traded for Dalton at the trade deadline. I mean, there's so many gaping needs. He's stuck in Carolina. Bryce Young's got to play. He absolutely has to play. There's no point in Andy Dalton being in Carolina anymore. There's no mentoring going on there. I mean, I'm sure there's some mentoring going on. I'm being a little facetious, but you know, they could have gone that should have been like, you could have netted some draft picks there very easily if you're Carolina. Anyways, Chargers, Lindsay Rhodes was on our show on my podcast this week on Wednesday, and then I heard her show on SiriusXM Fantasy Dirt. She was just talking about how the Chargers have a historically low win rate on rush attempts this year.
Yep.
And that's only going to, this is before 24 for 29 as a team against the Pats. And I know the Pats drag everything into the muck. They're like the Jets in that respect. In fact, they've lost 3 straight games while their defense has allowed 10 or fewer points. That's really hard to do. But still, come on. Every time they hand the ball off, it's a favor to the other team.
Yeah, I mean, they're at close to 26 points under expected, so like minus 26 EPA over the last 2 weeks for this offense. I mean, it's bad. It's really bad, and I think the injuries are a part of it. I think Eckler clearly just not being the same guy is a big part of it as well. Credit to them in some ways for going on the road and winning this game. I mean, it just could not have been more ugly. Like I mentioned, it was never on red zone. The reason for that is neither team entered the red zone at any point through the entire game.
That's an incredible.
Never even got in the red zone. You know, both of the field goals for the Chargers came outside of that, obviously. So, yeah, it was gross. It was kind of exactly what we thought this game would be in a lot of ways. I actually thought the Chargers would do a little bit better. I thought they would at least get into the double digits here. But I mean, for New England, this is not a good Chargers defense, right? It's actually played a little bit better. I thought they showed up against Baltimore. That was not something I expected. That was one of their better defensive efforts of the entire season. But it just hammered home the point that New England is as inept as any team offensively. And we'll see on the Stevenson injury as well. You know, had the fumble, went out shortly after that. And, you know, they're the Athletic already reporting yesterday afternoon that he could miss time. And typically when you get that, you know, it's at least a game.
Yep. Falcons, Jets. Trevor Siemian played. I mean, that speaks volumes right there. And they're thinking about going back to Zach Wilson. That's all you need to know about what happened in this game.
They're thinking about going back to Zach Wilson, and Zach Wilson is thinking about whether or not he even wants to be the quarterback.
Right. Right.
That's where we're at right now with the Jets. Yeah, Simeon was bad. Boyle was bad. The Jets, I mean, this was actually similar in a lot of ways, as you'd expect by the final score, to the New England game, because like both teams, like the Jets had so many opportunities to win this game. Like the Falcons just could not put them away. Like a field goal probably would have done it, honestly. And I know it would still be a 1-score game, but good luck scoring a touchdown and getting a 2-point conversion if you're the Jets. And the Falcons go up 13-8 after a very Falcons-y, 14-play drive that took off like almost the entire third quarter. They go up with 3.5 minutes left. Neither team scored the rest of the way. The Jets had 6 drives after that, and really never even approached scoring territory. Like they were never even threatening for a field goal.
Yeah, it was so bad, just so bad. There was a disputed fumble call in that game, but who cares? I mean, I think there was a question in the chat earlier about worried about the Jets shutting down Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. I don't think that happens because players play. But wow, I mean, it's just and the thing is, like, every week you have to decide, okay, how much am I going to downgrade Breece Hall? Because he could catch one pass and go for a big play, or he could break off one big run. But 13 for 16 running the ball. Garrett Wilson made a couple of nice catches, had another one overturned where he barely got a foot out. I mean, it would have been an incredible catch. Yeah. He got drilled for this, for his efforts, and got nothing to show for it there. But there's just no there. I mean, when your options are Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian, who is Trevor Siemian, and actually was maybe slightly worse than Boyle in some ways. Boyle threw an interception, but Siemian got sacked 3 times and averaged 5 yards an attempt. Just there's not much hope there. And the Falcons aren't good either. I mean, the Falcons, they had like the 4th worst like fantasy scoring defense going in this game, but it's the Jets. I was wrong on that one. I could have used them in DFS. I could have put them a little bit higher in my rankings, but I was like, yeah, there's just no pass rush. And they only got they got the 4 sacks, 3 of them late. But I don't know. It's just not much from this game at all.
No, I mean that's just how Jets games go, and honestly, how a lot of Falcons games go this season. On the Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall stuff, I'm with you. I don't see them getting shut down. It just doesn't. The only time it really happens is if you're in the other situation where you're really good and you're resting starters in week 18. But no, I don't think we see a true shutdown. Maybe they're a little more careful with the workload. I don't know. Maybe this seems like a team that's on the verge of like a third internal mutiny on the season. But there's just not a lot of value here, right? Like even go all the way back to the last game they won against the Giants. Like these are their point totals over the last 6 weeks: 13, 6, 12, 6, 13, 8. It's like, so you're really just hoping for like the one long play and you get some yardage fantasy points, because like the touchdowns, I mean, we have enough of a sample here that like this is not getting fixed anytime soon. Like they don't even have that tough of a schedule. I think it's the 22nd ranked schedule the rest of the way. Like you could score on Houston, teams that put up points on Miami. That Commanders game in week 16, maybe there's something there. But then you finish out at Cleveland and at New England, and those are 2 teams that want to play 13-8 games. So I don't really see the upside. This game was it 2-0 early on in favor of the Jets?
It was. It was.
I mean, I would have liked to see what the odds were for Jets Falcons to be 2-0 at some point. Like that felt like a very Jets Falcons score. No question about that. And by the way, when I mentioned, heading over to the Pato Sportsbook in Milwaukee, one of my good buddies placed a 13-leg no safety parlay. So he took no safety in any game. And of course we got a safety.
We got a few of them.
It was like 35 minutes into the day.
Yeah. We got a couple of them in the day. There was one late in the Cleveland Rams game too.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least you knew that parlay was dead right away. But I guess you don't have to sweat it. You don't have to stick around to the brutal end, I suppose. Rams Cleveland. This game was actually kind of entertaining, at times at least. Cleveland's defense again on the road, kind of a mess on the road. They're kind of becoming like predictable in that sort of sense.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row now. And I think the Browns, they still rightfully get the benefit of the doubt, but they've like their slip up games have been really concerning this year. And look, on balance, they're still like a great defense. A lot of the metrics would tell you, they're especially early on, like halfway through the year, one of the best defenses ever. But you think like that Colts game where they allowed 39 to Gardner Minshew, 400 some total yards in that one.
Mm-hmm.
They allowed 399 in this one as well. Jeez. Yeah, that's more than I would have expected. I mean, the Rams obviously poured it on late, and this was actually a more fun game than the final score would imply. It got out of hand late in the fourth quarter. But still very much in the balance until Joe Flacco threw an interception midway through the fourth quarter. And, the Rams put up 16 points in the final 6 minutes, which got them to 36. So this was by no means just like complete romp by the LA Rams. But this one to me was kind of a 50-50. I stayed away from it in just about everything. Didn't want to bet it, put it very low in the Pick'em League. Kind of thought any result was possible. But now 2 weeks in a row where the Rams have piled up 37 and 36 points. And more encouragingly to me was they got the wide receivers back involved. That had been something that they were putting up these numbers, but it was a lot of the running game. It was timely plays. Puka Nacua, 4 for 105, had a long, 70-yarder. Cooper Kupp, not a huge day, but got into the end zone. Saw 8 targets. You'll take that. And Kyren Williams still looked pretty good as well against a great rush defense in Cleveland. What do we think of Joe Flacco? I think it was the right move to go to him.
I think so too, but there's just limited amount of upside even with that. Although it's funny, he led the slate in attempted air yards yesterday. He had like over 400 attempted air yards, I think. But one of them was like an arm punt interception that you alluded to in the fourth quarter, where
that was bad.
Just didn't have a chance. He had a couple of overturned plays, and David Njoku had a heel out of bounds on a pretty long reception. I dumbly used Njoku in DFS. He's good for a mistake every game, though. I had a really good lineup, but I got nothing from my I used the Browns defense too. I don't know what I was thinking there, but for a couple of spots there where I just gave away points, and because I had like a Niners stack with Kamara, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a good lineup. Zach Moss did very little, by the way, too. That was another one, but we kind of against Tennessee. It was like kind of a free square play, and it just for the price is okay, but still we were expecting better. But the Cleveland side of things there, Jerome Ford was not effective running the ball this time, where he had been in previous times. They did a good job of shutting him down. Elijah Moore could be very important going forward. At 12 targets, Amari Cooper got concussed in this game. It was already questionable with the ribs, and then got a concussion. So we'll see what happens with them next week. Cleveland, they're home against your Jags, so that could be an interesting game. I don't know. I thought it was the right decision. On the Rams side, Nacua briefly left, and I thought it looked pretty bad at first, but then he was right back in there. And not only was he in there, but they're like going running plays with him too. Like the offense ran through him and Kyren Williams more than it did through Cooper Kupp, and I thought that was noteworthy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing. The breakaway speed with Nacua is still jarring because he's a big guy, right? He almost has more of a kind of hybrid tight end type of build, and on that 70-yarder, ran away from multiple defenders on a good defense, missed almost the entire second quarter, and going into halftime, you're thinking, man, if I used him at DFS, got off to a great start, but at what cost? And played 24 of 26 real snaps in the second half, so that was encouraging. Doesn't look like anything to worry about there. The Cooper thing, though, is definitely something to monitor. He was banged up last week. This is now a concussion. We'll see how long he ends up in protocol. But once he went out, like you said, Elijah Moore was the guy. It was actually Cedric Tillman who ended up playing a ton of snaps. He was targeted 6 times by Flacco as well. But they were remarking even on the broadcast, there is a clear connection for whatever reason between Elijah Moore and Joe Flacco. I guess they would have overlapped last year, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say they have played together with the Jets too, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, that must be it. But it was almost to the point where by the end of it, when the Browns were scrambling a little bit, he was going out of his way to target Elijah Moore, even in situations when he probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing, we saw a Demarcus Robinson sighting. Had 4 for 55 and a touchdown. Did cost Nacua a big play on a hold, but. He was, even when he was with the Chiefs, though, they liked him because he blocked well. You block well, sometimes you're going to hold too. It happens. So that's something to watch for. Rams are in the playoff hunt. They're 6-6. In the NFC, that's good. That's pretty decent.
Yeah, it is. And they got to go to Baltimore next week. So we'll see about that. That's going to be a monster test. I think for them, we talk a lot about Green Bay trending in the right direction, but the Rams have quietly won 3 in a row. I think this is their Chiefs game. Right, where it's if you find a way to win this, okay, then we'll start to take you seriously. After that, Commanders, Saints, Giants, those are all winnable, but they do finish out at San Francisco. So tough draw there. I think if you're the Rams, you're hoping that San Francisco has the 1 seed locked up, which I don't think is likely going into Week 18, because that game at San Francisco could decide your fate.
I was just going to say, they need to win the 3 sandwich games. They need to win Washington, Saints, and Giants. And the Washington game and the Saints game are at home. Giants is in New York. Those, you got to win those games. 9-8 might get you there.
I think it will. I think it probably gets you the 7. What's interesting in the NFC is you got 2 spots that are very much up for grabs. Minnesota losing last week Chicago, I think really opened things up. They're at 6-6. Green Bay's at 6-6. The Rams are 6-6. Seattle 6-6. Even it's not even out of the question that we could get 2 NFC South teams in. Sadly, like Tampa Bay and New Orleans, they're 5-7. They're they'll still be battling with Atlanta for that division title, but those teams are very much in the mix as well. I think New Orleans is a cutoff for me. Like I know technically the 4-8 Giants and the 4-8 Bears are in the hunt. Those are not playoff teams. They will not be. They will not be factoring into this.
They are not serious people. It basically is like, I don't even view the Saints as really serious. I mean, they could still win their division, but right now, currently as it stands, Vikings and Packers have the tiebreaker over the Rams and Seahawks. I guess either the Bucks or Saints could find a way to eke in there too, but I'm not even seeing that. It would take a lot. They do get their own division to play in. Speaking of which, Bucks Panthers, yay! Let's finish off with this scintillating instant classic here.
Man, we took the Buccaneers to cover in the Circa contest and felt like it was the right play. Obviously, it was not. But the defense, led up a late touchdown, 11-play drive for the Panthers, who actually had a chance to win this game with another drive, and that ended in a Bryce Young interception. But I think this one played out about like you'd expect, right? Tampa Bay at home, I felt like had a better chance to at least win this game by 2 scores. But we had some elements as well. It was raining pretty hard early on. Tampa Bay just kind of did what they do, right? Baker Mayfield, inefficient, got to 200 yards, threw his interception, had his touchdown to Mike Evans, who is once again over 1,000 yards. He's done that every year of his career. I think Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. That's a discussion for a different day. But he's done it. He's done it with so many different quarterbacks, so many different situations. He's got the ring. I think the accumulative numbers are going to stack up with anybody, especially if he can, do another year or two of this.
I think he's a no-brainer Hall of Famer.
Okay, good. Because I think coming into the year, it was very debatable. But getting the ring, and then, like I said, I mean, he might be top 10 all time in receiving touchdowns, which is saying a lot. That's tough to do. And then the yardage will be there as well. But that is neither here nor there. This is just a very NFC South type of game.
Yeah.
Panthers actually ran the ball relatively effectively. I wouldn't say they were gashing the Buccaneers by any means, but they committed to it. We saw Chuba Hubbard run the ball 25 times. Miles Sanders, his fantasy value has been dead for a few weeks. That was hammered home once again. I mean, this is Chuba Hubbard's backfield pretty clearly. Classic Rachaad White 20 for 84 game. He got his touchdown, continues to hang around in fantasy. Saw almost nothing out of Chris Godwin as well. Mike, they've kind of traded off sometimes. Mike Evans has certainly been more consistent, but this was a total bottom out game for Chris Godwin. 0 catches on 3 targets.
Yeah, and he came in with a neck issue, and Stefania Bell on the ESPN pregame show was expressing her concern about that. And that's fair, but if the neck was a problem, why are you giving him a running attempt, which is where he got his touchdown? The thing is, on draft day, those were Evans versus Godwin was kind of considered a wash. And in fact, Godwin, I think, had the higher ADP. And in the NFFC primetime, I had that choice, and I went Godwin. And just try to think about this. This is a pretty decent team I have, and I have good receivers. But man, that choice is a bad choice, as it turns out. Really bad choice. So
it's the difference of 32 spots right now
in
terms of their PPR ranking, and Mike Evans ranks even higher in standard leagues because he has so many touchdowns. I mean, he's a top 5 receiver in standard leagues. He's wide receiver 7 right now on the year, and it's or he had that great start to the year, and we're thinking, all right, this probably isn't sustainable. But I mean, we are obviously far enough into the year now where that's it. I'd have to look at like the Yahoo MVPs page that we always talk about with P&L as far as like, which players are rostered on the best teams. Mike Evans has to be up there.
I'd agree. Absolutely. On the Carolina side, Adam Thielen might have been on that page at one point in time, but another disappointing performance against a really bad secondary. 3 for 25, 6 targets. Jonathan Mingo was the primary target with 10 targets, 6 for 69 though. I mean, let's face it, this Carolina passing offense is not going to raise any boats. It is a receding tide. And just that last sequence, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, badly missed passes on both plays. Just that it was emblematic of where the Carolina passing game is right now.
It's up there with the worst in the league. And, like I said last week, it's not, you don't get the comedy that you do with a team like the Jets or the Patriots, but it's just as inept in a lot of ways, man. And it's just like, it's crushing to watch because I still really like Bryce Young. There's more in there than what he's shown, but I mean, Carolina's been terrible on 3rd downs all year. They were 3 of 15 yesterday. If you factor in 4th downs, they were 4 of 18. try to convert. I think this is now 7 games in a row that they put up fewer than 300 yards of total offense. I mean, barely over 4 yards per play yesterday. That's terrible. Young took 4 sacks. They had a bunch of penalties. I think one of the narratives, if you like Carolina, and look, they did cover. So, props to those who took the Panthers. But, you're like, oh, do you get the post-coach firing bounce? This looked like the exact same team to me. Nothing really changed for Carolina.
Yep.
And, you look at their remaining schedule, Saints, Falcons, Packers, Jags, Bucks. We might be looking at a 1-16 team.
Yep. Bears are the big winners here with them having Carolina's pick. One of the all-time bad trades as it's shaping up to be. We've had this trade. We've had the Russell Wilson trade. We've had the Deshaun Watson trade. All of these have been spectacularly awful for the acquiring teams.
Very, very, very bad. Yes. It's funny because in the NBA with trades like that, it almost always goes in favor of the team that gets the superstar player.
Right.
Because those guys are just so valuable. And, there's always these dreams of picks that don't turn into what you think they are. But yeah, all 3 of those have been all timers and they've all happened in close succession. I think for a lot of reasons, like the Watson deal might be the worst of them all. We'll see if he can ever return to form. Obviously the Wilson deal is a disaster, but yeah, man. I mean, handing over, it just doesn't happen in the NFL, right? Like in the NBA, you get this every now and then, right? Where, because picks are traded so far out that, teams almost forget that they have these obligations. But to trade next year's first and be as bad as Carolina's been, I mean, they don't have the number 1 pick locked up, but it really feels like it. I mean, I don't see them winning 2 more games the rest of the year. To have to hand that number 1 pick to Chicago, I mean, it's awful. I mean, if you're Carolina, I don't know what the improvement plan is because you could go shopping in free agency, I guess, if you want. You got an owner who's willing to spend money, but this is a team that has just an immense number of holes right now, and I don't even know what you address first.
Offensive line. It's absolutely offensive line. If you're going to if Bryce Young's going to have a career, he's got to have some time at all. I think that offensive line is really awful. I think it was a real choice of them to make this trade away the best receiver, and then still have this terrible line and not any good any good wide receivers. When Adam Thielen is your big acquisition, he's not a outside burner. DJ Chark, there was a chart going around talking about how Carolina loses every outside one-on-one battle, whether it's Chark or whether it's Terrace Marshall, 2 bottom 5 guys in terms of that. It's just no support. It's just a setup for failure situation in Young. I don't think Young his story is written off.
No,
but he's in such a bad spot.
He's in such a bad spot, and again, I don't know if it improves that much next season. That's what's concerning. Is like I'm not of the belief that you can ruin a quarterback in 1 year, especially somebody with the makeup of Bryce Young. Like I think he's the right guy to try to persevere through this. Like he's the anti Johnny Manziel in every way, right? Like I don't think he's going to just fold it up and this is who he is. But I don't know if you're going to be able to put a better product around him next year, right? Like even if you invest capital in the offensive line, it's you still got maybe the worst pass catching group in the NFC.
Yep, that's right.
And you got a defense that I think needs improvements as well. So it's a really, really bad situation. And a lot of it, of course, traces back to David Tepper. So yeah, it's tough because I think I was really excited to see what Bryce Young could be. And in a lot of ways, he's been disappointing. I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but he's been put how many quarterbacks could succeed in this? I mean, there are a lot of good veteran quarterbacks that would have a terrible year for this Carolina team.
Yeah, I will just say, look how hopeless Houston looked 2 years ago, or even last year. Turnarounds can still happen quicker than you expect. You got to get those key pieces in though, and that's tough. All right, we'll conclude on that note. Nick's got a hoops podcast. I'm giving him all 5 minutes to rest his vocal cords for. So big thanks to everybody who jumped in here. Make sure to catch Nick and I tonight, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on SiriusXM Fantasy. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.